like to thank you all for coming. It's always a real joy for me to do what I do in libraries. I'm going to tell a little story first. Why I do kind of the various programs I do and many different variety of sources. But the Ghost Show is actually the first show I ever did in a library. Now 10 years that I've been doing this show in libraries. I grew up on the southwest side of Chicago. 49th and Damon was my young childhood. When I was about 8, I discovered my branch library, the back of the yard's branch library. Would literally go with my little red wagon, come back with a wagon full of books. I've moved several times since then. I live in Batavia now. Still have that wagon. A couple of the books too. But I was lucky enough to have some librarians take me under their wing, give me the run of the place, and open up all different kinds of worlds to me. And because of that is why you're seeing me do this show in libraries. In fact, I remember distinctly being in a very, very small Chicago Public Library meeting room with a 16-millimeter projector watching the original Frankenstein with a group of kids sitting on the floor there. So really, at this point, you should give the library a round of applause for having these kinds of programs and stuff. Because of that, I'm going to start by reading something. No event is so terribly well adapted to inspire the supremeness of bodily and mental distress. The unendurable oppression of the lungs, the stifling fumes, the blackness of absolute night, the silence like a sea that overwhelms. This is from one of my favorite stories. It's about a man who suffers from tapophobia. Now, tapophobia is a peculiar fixation which spread across Europe and America about the middle of the 1800s. And you have to wonder why, suddenly, all over the world, people had this intense fear of being buried alive. Could have been the rumors. There were rumors that there were voices in the graveyards at night. There were rumors when some of these coffins were disinterred, the inside lids were scratched by the hands of the undead. And the bodies were twisted into horrible contortions as if they've suffered some sort of agony in the grave. But those were just rumors. The interesting thing is that the fear was so great that it created some of the funerary practice that we still use today, even though we've lost the original meaning behind them. It was the Victorians that would lay out a body for 3 days to see if it would rot or if it would wake up. Which is why we go to awake. It's the Victorians that would surround the body with flowers, not to honor the person like we do now, but to cover the smell from when the body began to putrefy. One of the strangest things that come out of this time was an invention called a safety coffin. It's a coffin buried in the earth that had a long tube coming up and out that provided oxygen in case the occupant were to wake up. Tied around the occupant's wrist was a piece of string that went up through the tube into a bell. This is a cemetery bell. The handle has a little hole in it where a rod went through. The string was tied to a finial on top, and of course, if someone were to move in the grave, the bell would ring. Now, of course, someone passing by the cemetery might hear the bell and immediately run away. Presumably to get a shovel, I think. The thing is that some cemeteries went so far as to have someone stay up all night long listening for the sound of the bell. In fact, this is where we get the term graveyard shift. The thing is history doesn't tell us of anyone that had ever been saved by one of these bells, which is strange because the makers of the bells, they advertised that 1 out of 7 people was in jeopardy of being buried alive. One. 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. Hello. Your name is?
Patty.
Patty, I am William. Would you come up and help me, please?
God, no.
This is fine. I want to sit in the front row.
Take a seat. Trust me, I would have found you anyways.
I'm sure.
We're going to play a little game of imagination. I want you to imagine that you're sitting at home in your most comfortable chair, reading your favorite book, drinking, it's late at night. What would you be drinking late at night?
Water.
Water. Quite the party animal.
You know me well.
Drinking with a little bit of water, and it's starting to get later and later. It's midnight. Getting darker and darker. 1 a.m. Harder and harder to see the words on the page. Do me a favor, would you put out your hand nice and flat? So hard, in fact, that you can no longer see the words on the page. Close your eyes. Keep them closed until I ask you to open them, please. And you now find yourself surrounded by a kind of darkness you have never experienced before. A darkness so deep, so impenetrable, it's almost suffocating. The only sound you hear is the beating of your heart, which seems strangely loud in the silence. The worst is you want to move, but you're too afraid to move. Afraid that if you reach out in any direction, your hand will be stopped by a satin-covered barrier just inches away. You feel a kind of blind animal panic creeping in. But then you remember, you are prepared for this. Help is only moments away. Keep your eyes closed, but with your other hand, reach over, grab the bell, and ring the bell. I'm sure somebody will hear it sooner or later. Just keep your eyes closed. You can put your hand down.
Okay.
I'm going to shade your eyes for a moment so you don't get hit by the glare. You can open your eyes. And at that moment, the fear of the grave, the suffocating, the satin barrier, the darkness all fades away. And at that point, you remind yourself that before you go to bed, you should never ever read a story from Edgar Allan Poe. Thank you very much for your help. I appreciate that. Now, if you still have a fear of the grave, they still make safety coffins, even though modern embalming methods have pretty much eliminated the worry of waking up inside there. And modern safety coffins have oxygen tanks, intercoms, closed-circuit television. Of course, if you're on a budget, maybe they can just drop your cell phone down with you, I think. Just make sure you have a little more reliable model than this one. Thank you. I've always been in love with horror films, and I want to try a little experiment with someone today. What I've done is I have a little notebook here called Horror Movies. And in there I've written down tons of names, dates, sometimes the main actor or something interesting about it. This is 2018, Martin Freeman starred in a British horror film called Ghost Stories. Also, by the way, the guy who wrote it and directed it, he is a professional magician. So it's, of course, 1931, Bela Lugosi, Dracula. 1980, Kevin Bacon in Friday the 13th. He's the only kind of star in there. Often people sit in back because they're afraid to be picked. So I would like to come back and find someone that might be able to help me with this. Hi, your name is?
Oh, Bagni.
Yeah. And your name is?
I'm Stella.
Stella, nice to meet you. How about maybe you have a gentleman for this? Sir, would you help me out, please?
Sure.
Your name is?
Jerry.
Jerry, come on up, Jerry. Would you just stand right here, please? All I'm going to ask you to do is take this notebook, hold it in flat in your hand like this, give it a little peek open like this, remember the movie, and if you can remember any of the other details that are on there. Don't flip through, because then you're going to see a bunch of movies and the images are kind of going to be garbled up in your head with that. So just cut anywhere you want, sort of peek in there. Remember the film, like that. And just don't say anything. Just get that in your head. You have?
Yes.
Have it in there? Concentrate on it. Try and get an image of it. Even if you've not seen the film, hopefully the title will be able to give you sort of an image that you can create, right?
Right.
Have you seen this film, by the way?
Yes.
You have? Oh, good. So if a scene or something comes into your mind, I get the feeling that it's not a new film, it's kind of an older film.
Yes.
But not what we consider classic, like in the 30s and stuff. It's
Right.
it's
In between.
like the silver period of horror films, we'd say. I'm getting dark. It shouldn't be that hard, being a horror film, right? A great deal of fear. It's actually more of like a dark house. And you see dead people.
Yes.
Is this, I think this is, stars really what is considered a classic horror actor. I think you have a good image of him in your mind, in particular. So I think I have the era. Now, it actually was a play, I believe, on another film. That's another story by Shirley Jackson. It was a play on this because that was so popular at the time. And in fact, that story has been made into a Netflix special. They don't pay me for this, by the way, Netflix. Is it The House on Haunted Hill?
Yes.
Vincent Price, 1959?
You got it.
That's exactly what I had written there.
Yep, that's it.
Thank you very much for your help. I appreciate it. We're getting real close to Halloween, which is absolutely my favorite time of the year. I really kind of grew up on Halloween. I was lucky enough at the age of 11 to get a job in a magic novelty costume shop. And so every year I just loved to dress up in different costumes and things like that. That was always the most fun. That adventure in the neighborhood where you get to go trick-or-treating and visit all these houses and stuff and have this fantasy and fun. And so because of that, I'm going to take a few of you trick-or-treating with me today. Let's do it this way. But a couple gentlemen and a couple women. Sir, would you help me out? We have less men to pick from than women here. So your name is?
Tom.
Tom, just stand over by the chair there. And your name is?
Mike.
Mike? Nice to see you, Mike. Would you stand over on this side by that chair there? What's your name?
Mary.
Mary. Nice to meet you, Mary. Would you come up and stand over
Absolutely.
by there? And would you help me here?
Sure.
Your name is?
Erica.
Erica. Nice to meet you, Erica. Thank you very much. And stand on the left side there.
Okay.
You'll get used to the light, don't worry. You don't worry about it. Just come a little closer. Stand in a line here. Stand in a line here. Come a little closer. Stand in a line. Now, of course, if we're going trick-or-treating and you were to come to my house dressed like this, there's no way I would give you any candy. No costumes, right? So we need to get you in costume, and of course, don't worry, I don't have any wigs, capes, or masks, or anything like that. I have name tags. And we're going to use those to be our costume. Now, for example, most years I dressed as one character in literature. One of my favorite books, in fact, I collect editions of it, and I do own a first edition Dracula. I say that not to brag, but to impress you. And so I'm going to give you each a name tag. Don't write anything down yet. You also get a marker. Don't write anything down yet. I'm going to move to the back because I don't want to see what you're writing. I want you to write down a costume Something you may wear this year, something you wore last year, something you wore as a child, your favorite costume as a child, something you always wanted to wear and your evil parents wouldn't let you. I want you to write that down now, please. Meanwhile, I will tell a story. So growing up on the Southwest Side, I was raised, I went to St. Michael's the Archangel School and Church, raised Roman Catholic, and when I graduated kindergarten, they had a kindergarten graduation where you got brought on stage. Father Lewis would bring each child to the microphone and ask them what they wanted to grow up as. Most children said, they wanted to be a policeman or a fireman, something like that, until little Billy got up there and said he wanted to be Dracula. They have never forgotten me. It's a true story, though. Keep your name tags face down in your hands, please. And it was Mary, right?
Yes.
Pass your name tags down to Mary. Keep them face down. And then pass your markers in the opposite direction here. Mary, I want you to mix those name tags up so even you don't know which one belongs to which person. It's going to be my job to figure out which costume belongs to which person. Okay. The first one is Casper. Casper. Now, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to ask each one of you if you are Casper. I'm assuming Casper the ghost, the friendly ghost. And so I want you to say yes. That means 3 of you will be lying, 1 of you will be telling the truth. Now, you would be surprised at how many people don't really understand these instructions that I'm telling them. So I'm going to repeat this. Whether you are Casper or not, just say yes. Are you Casper?
Yes.
Are you Casper?
Yes.
Are you Casper?
Yes.
Are you Casper?
Yes.
Now, you may be reading body language, as I sort of do at this point, and I felt one person was more confident than the rest with this, and I think you are Casper, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that is. Someone is a mad scientist. Mad scientist. This time I'm going to have everyone say no. No matter, I'm going to ask you if you're a mad scientist. I want you to say no. Are you the mad scientist?
No.
Are you the mad scientist? Are you the mad scientist?
No.
Very emphatic. But if you notice, everyone looked at me, but only one person kind of looked away right after they said no. Because you're the mad scientist, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes, you are. A clown. Could be a nice clown, could be an evil clown. We don't know this. We know it's one of you 2 ladies. Just don't say anything at this point. Are you a clown? Are you a clown? Are you a clown? You're the clown, aren't you? Yes. Thank you very much. Last one's still face down there. We know it's yours, but we don't know what it is yet. So I'm going to try and figure out what you might go as. You're a nurse?
Dental hygienist.
Dental hygienist, okay. Dental hygienists have a reputation of being fun-loving.
Very fun.
So I think you're going to be a little wicked in what you're doing. This is sort of a classic character, but I don't see this one as that often anymore, which is quite interesting. You wear blue all the time, don't you? Every day it's blue, 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 blue. You'd probably like a different shade then, right?
Yeah.
Maybe like red? Because you'd probably want to be the devil, wouldn't you?
Yep.
That's it. Go ahead, you can grab it. I'm going to touch it. You can see it's still face down there and show everybody that you are the devil. Thank you very much. You put it down. Thank you. Good. Now that we've all gotten into costume, we can go trick-or-treating. I forgot to mention something at the beginning of this. As will happen when people go trick-or-treating with me, even though 5 of us are going to go trick-or-treating, only 1 of us is going to come back alive. On the table here, I have a plate which has 5 treat bags. The candy in those treat bags, 4 of them have been poisoned. 1 of them is safe. We are each going to choose from there. But this is going to be completely out of my hands, so whatever is left on the table is what I'm going to get, so I have just as much chance of anyone of not surviving or surviving this as anything. So, mad scientist, take a bag, please. And the devil? Casper? And finally, our clown. You happy with that?
Sure.
Yeah, you don't seem that happy. And I don't blame you. You only had 2 bags to choose from where everybody else had increasingly more. So I'm going to give you another opportunity. You can stick with what you have. You can trade with what's on the table, or you can switch with anyone that chose previously. So it's entirely up to you on what you want to do.
I think I'll switch.
Okay. I'll give everyone the choice. Casper, you can switch with the table or anyone else.
I'm going to stick.
Confidence. The devil? Stay?
I'm staying.
Only you? That means I get to this one. I want you to open up your bags. Inside the bag, you will find a Hershey's candy bar. That is your treat. On the back side of it, there is a piece of paper. That is your trick. It's on there with double stick tape, so just pull that off. You can save the candy for later. Open up your piece of paper and show everybody what it has on it. So that was arsenic, cyanide, strychnine, and you're allergic to shellfish. Thanks. Much funnier than hemlock. And of course, I get to go home with all the candy. Thank you very much for your help. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. You go back to go back to your seats. A poltergeist is a noisy or meddlesome ghost which can move physical objects, even large pieces of furniture, and toss them about the room. A poltergeist is said to be able to haunt an entire house, or even a single room like an attic or a basement, or even a child's toy, like the dollhouse of Millie Riggs. She collected dollhouses. By the time she died, she had over 20 of them. They lined the walls of her Chicago flat, which was startlingly empty, except for a cot, a table, a chair, and a candle, which when lit, cast gloomy and ghostly shadows along the walls. The effect on the scene on her landlady when she found her after hearing the scream was at once both chilling and bizarre. Because she found Millie dead lying in front of a dollhouse, her hand reaching up, her heart burst, her mouth agape in a scream. Millie was an opera singer in the late 1900s, or the early 1900s, I should say. And she had crippling stage fright. And one day she finally had a breakdown and retreated to her room. Could no longer perform or sing. She would sit there alone, childless, husbandless, staring at the dollhouses, perhaps sharing her hopes and her dreams. They weren't even ordinary dollhouses with floors and furniture and stuff like that. They were empty. Empty perhaps as her own life. And she would sit in front of them and watch, wait, wonder. Now one day her landlady, Mrs. Cardwell, stopped and saw her in the hallway and saw she had some children's blocks, and asked her what was going on. She said, "I finally broken through." Broken through to where, my child? To the other side, to the other side. And she laughed a disconnected laugh. I've finally broken through, and I've gotten a sign, and it wants to play in the house. It wants to play in the house. 2 days later, Millie Riggs was dead. Now, it went around certain paranormal circles that the house was indeed haunted by a poltergeist, and that it took the guise of a child that Millie didn't have and convinced her to end her life and join her inside the house. Now, I can't tell you exactly how I've obtained this dollhouse. What I can tell you is that I've never had an experience with it. We don't know what Millie did with the blocks. Perhaps she just set them up to see if anything would happen. Perhaps she tried to exchange messages with whatever she thought might be there. Perhaps she was just insane. Perhaps, if you stared long enough at the box, you might see a message in there for you. What I can say is, perhaps tonight we will try and see if Millie will come out and play with us a little bit. Maybe we better not tonight. Besides libraries being such a major influence in my life, my biggest influence was my great Aunt Bernice, Aunt Bernie. And she was a marvelous storyteller. She died when I was 16. She was in her 90s at that point. She had lived an incredible life and full of just telling me stories, probably stories that shouldn't have been told to a young child at the time. But she fostered that idea in me. And the great thing about the stories, and some of them were read from books, and some of them were made up and family lore and from the neighborhood and that sort of thing, is that that's when I discovered the power of the story to create something that doesn't exist. You know that when you read a book, what you're reading, you can see in your head, doesn't exist. In fact, it doesn't exist the same way for other people. Everyone has their own vision and version of what might be in that story. That is a powerful thing with a story. So much so that obviously I became a storyteller and writer. Several books. If you've been to other programs, you've seen some books. Also, I have one here. It's an anthology that I helped create called Familiar Spirits, Stories That Go Bump in the Night. It's a dozen stories, ghost stories. Makes me happy. Now, I think I want to use this book to help someone see something that doesn't exist. I'm going to tell you real quick, though, that it is available after the program for just $10. 12 stories. 10 of the authors are women. 2 of them are men, me being one of them. And so I'm really kind of proud at that. Some of the most twisted stories in here are from the ladies, so it was good to go. So I'm going to need someone to help me with this, because they're going to have an unusual experience here. They're going to see something that doesn't exist. And I want to... Your name is?
Jenny.
Jenny. Nice to meet you, Jenny. Do you need glasses to read or anything like that?
No.
Oh, would you come up and help me, please? Take a seat in the far seat. Just sit and close your eyes for a moment. I want you to listen to my voice, because now I'm going to try and get you in kind of in the mood, the emotional state, the relaxed state, to be able to see this thing that doesn't exist. And in fact, everything I am saying right now is hopefully going to guide you to this. Earlier today, I took that book, opened it to a page, kind of scanned over the page, got an image in my mind of the page and the contents of the page. And you're going to see this also. What you're going to see, though, doesn't exist. But it's going to be as real to you as this audience is to me. And I want you to understand that. Because once you see this thing, you might feel like you need to say something, or you might laugh or something like that. Try not to do that. Just take it in. Just accept it for what it is at the time. Because after that, this is going to get really, really weird. You with me? You can open your eyes. You're going to take the flashlight. I want you to take a look, and you can see that there are 165 pages in this book, right?
Right.
And I'm going to scan through the pages, and you can see that those are like all the acknowledgments we went through there. Here's the author biographies there. You can see that every page is different. Some of them are half pages, some of them are full pages. I'm sure we'll get to a title page there. It's not the same page repeated over and over again in the book or anything like that. In fact, there are over 60,000 words in this book. But we're going to only need one page and one word, in fact. And what we're going to do is I'm going to have these 2 envelopes also.
Okay.
They will be important in a moment. I'm going to flip through the book. I want you to say stop.
Stop.
Before the end of the book.
Stop.
Okay. I'm going to save the spot with the envelope. This other envelope has something that, well, is impossible. Because of that, I don't want someone to think I tampered with it at any point. So I need to keep it safe. Sit on it.
Okay.
I am going to open up the page. I want you to look at the bottom and get the page number first. The page number first. Do you have it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now I'm going to have you scan over the page. One of the words is kind of going to jump out at you as being more important than the rest. I want you to remember that word. Just remember that word when you have it.
Okay.
You have it
Yep.
ready. Okay. So, what page did you look at?
89.
Page 89. And what word jumped out at you as being important?
Embarrassed.
That's not what you're feeling now, right? That's the word you saw, right? Okay. Page 89, embarrassed.
Uh-huh.
This is amazing. Because that's exactly the page and the word that I saw this afternoon when I did this same thing. Doubters. Inside this envelope, there's a piece of paper. Would you take it out, please? Open it up. Inside, you will see written page 89 and the word embarrassed. Hang on to it. They still seem less than impressed. But that's okay, because I told you this was going to get really weird. What would you tell me if I were to say that page 89 does not exist in this book?
That you're wrong?
That I'm wrong. I want you to look through the book, look through the entire book, be completely comfortable in understanding that there is no page 89 in this book.
There is none. No.
Because
It's missing.
this afternoon I tore page 89 out of the book. Now I told you you've seen something impossible, something that didn't exist. But it did exist. But now people start to get ahead of me, because I gave you an envelope to keep safe.
Right.
Would you get that envelope, please? Open it. Take out what's inside. Page 89, with the word embarrassed circled on it, like you saw, right?
Yes.
You can confirm that this is the actual page
That is.
that's been ripped out. It matches the tear like that?
Yes.
Thank you very much for your help. I appreciate that. My full name is William Joseph Pack. The Joseph comes from my great uncle Joseph, a man I never met. He died long before I was ever born. But I feel like I know him for the stories that his wife, my great Aunt Bernice, Aunt Bernie, used to tell about him. He was a man of stature in the family, the center of the family at the time, the man that my father and grandfather most wanted to be like. He was a Chicago police officer, and an unusual one. At a time when it was a department known for its graft and its greed, mostly honest. Now, I can't say that he didn't get favors for his position. He did live only one block away from his Honorable Edward Kelly, the first of 5 men to be elected mayor of Chicago from the neighborhood of Bridgeport. But all in all, he was known for his fair dealings and well liked in the neighborhood. His death was the second most profound event in Aunt Bernie's life. See, he was unusual in another way. As she put it, he believed in the occult. He went to psychics, read Fate magazine, investigated haunted houses. He may have been the first police detective in the department there to actually consult a psychic on an active case. But family lore doesn't tell us exactly if it worked or not. Now, it would have been easy to think of him as sort of a kook, but he was mostly stable in the rest of his life. He didn't drink much, didn't go out carousing. He really only had one vice. Pipe tobacco. Prince Albert in the can. If you know the joke, you can insert it now. This is actually one of his tobacco tins from the 30s. It's not, it's empty now and doesn't really even smell like tobacco, right? But it's a nice reminder of the guy that I was kind of named after. I have a few other, not much, but I have a few other kind of things. In here I have a few of his pipes, a key or two, a photograph, that sort of thing. But I think the novelty of the tobacco tin is what really kind of interests me the most. It was a dark October night Uncle Joe had come home from a long shift, and as he would in the wee hours of the morning, instead of going upstairs to that would wake people up, he stayed in the parlor and lay down on the couch. What he didn't know is that as soon as Aunt Bernie heard the familiar scuff of his shoes in the house, that she started to wake up. She would get herself together to go down and make breakfast. What she didn't know when she passed him lying there peacefully on the couch was that a heart attack had struck him like a lightning bolt, and he lay there dead. She didn't know until she put the coffee on the table. He always stirred when the smell of fresh coffee was in the house, and this time he didn't come in the kitchen. She knew. She couldn't even bring herself to go into the front room. She called to her son Eddie. Said, "Eddie, Pop's dead on the couch. Go down to St. Barbara's and get a priest." It caused a minor scandal that she didn't call an ambulance. But she said she already knew, and he needed more help than a doctor could give him. Now, even though he had this sort of weakness for the occult, he had his full Christian burial, police honors, and Aunt Bernie went on with her life. Be about a year later. She was walking home in the evening with a bag of groceries when two men roughly pulled her into an alley. They wanted to steal her purse. She should have just given it to them, but she was a tough Chicago broad. And she fought them. So much so that they threw her to the ground and she broke her arm. She screamed, some from the pain, some from the fear. And one of those men pulled a knife, intent on silencing that scream. But then they stopped. They weren't looking at her anymore. They were looking past her. And they had this look of fear on their faces. They dropped her purse and they ran. The next thing she knew, she woke up in the hospital. I remember this story as clear as the first time she told it. She swore that before she passed out, she heard that familiar scuff of Uncle Joe's shoes in that alley and could smell his pipe tobacco in the air. And that's the most profound event in Aunt Bernie's life. She never tired of telling that story. I remember I must have been about 10 or 11 and heard this story for the umpteenth time, and finally I had gotten up the courage to ask her, "Aunt Bernie, when you die, are you going to come back?" She smiled and looked at me and said, "Well, maybe. But just a wink and a nod. Just a wink and a nod to let you know everything's okay." It's been some 30 years, more than 30 years since she died. And I don't think I'm ready for a sign yet. But I often think about that night, what could have happened. And I often wonder about myself. Is Uncle Joe watching over me? In my time of need, would I smell his pipe tobacco in the air? Do you smell that?
Yeah.
It smells like tobacco, right? Yes? Thank you, Uncle Joe. So I ended up inheriting a lot of stuff from my Uncle Joe, besides the stories from my Aunt Bernie. Because he spent his time discovering, examining places that people thought might have been haunted. I want to tell you about a story that he wasn't involved with, but he got sort of me involved with because of fostering this interest in me. It was in the late 80s, and let me tell you some of the story first, and then I'll tell you when I got involved. Because this happened much further than that. At Fulton and Green Streets in Chicago, where an old Victorian house used to stand. They called it the Gale House, where John and Catherine Gale had lived there for some time. Now, Catherine was always, I have a picture of Catherine, in fact. Catherine was always somewhat sickly. And she was seen less, would you hold on to that, please? She was seen less and less in the neighborhood. But when she was, people would ask her what's going on, and she said she heard like pounding in the walls, scratching noises. And then she wasn't seen anymore at all. People would come to the house to try and see her, and John would send them on their way, saying she was too sick. And then he would say she left. She'd gone back east to be with her children. But then he did a strange thing. He closed himself up in that house and became sort of a hermit. Even his housekeeper, Mrs. Collins, she wouldn't say anything about it when she was out shopping or something like that. And so this sort of creates a hole and a vacuum that needs to be filled. And you know how neighborhoods are. The rumors will start. They weren't surprised that maybe she left this kind of strange and somewhat cruel and angry man. So that maybe he was driving her insane and sent her to an asylum. Maybe the house really was haunted. Maybe he was conducting occult experiments in there. People would be so afraid of the place that they wouldn't pass in front of it anymore. They would cross the street. Rumors went that if a stray dog or a child got in the yard, they'd never be seen of again. And it went on like this for some time until John himself vanished. The police tried to look for him for 3 years to no success at all. And the extended family tried to stay there once in a while, but never stayed very long. The house mostly stayed vacant for almost 50 years. And then that's where I come into the story. They were going to tear down this house to build apartment buildings there. And they were stripped it of its architectural details, and we're going to auction off these things. And a lover of all things Victorian myself, that I wanted to maybe have a souvenir from this house, this legendary ghost house. At the auction, Mrs. Collins' daughter stopped me, and you don't need to know her name, we'll just call her Ms. Collins for this, but I found out that she still had her mother's keys to the house, and I doubted they would work, but I convinced her to let me try them anyway, because I wanted to see this house. And going up to it, the neighborhood had not been kind to it. It was crumbling a little, some broken windows. But the key worked. I was shocked. How could it work after all these years? But to be honest, the neighborhood was so frightened by this, even like drug addicts wouldn't squat in the place because it was so terrifying to them. And going in, I could see it bright and sunny outside, but it seemed like I was walking into a tomb. And of course, the dust and the rays of light, the vacant house. But walking around, it didn't seem like there was anything particular about it in any way, just an abandoned old house. That wasn't until I reached a room upstairs, the top of this quite dangerous staircase. Interestingly enough, this room was still furnished. And going in, I was trying to deny what I was experiencing, but I couldn't deny it any longer. The best way I can describe it is if you've ever played hide and seek, and as a seeker you've gone into a room and you just know someone's in there, even though you can't see them, you just know. That's what I was feeling. And it unnerved me so much that I turned away, but then I saw this like wet spot, this fresh wet spot on the floor. I reached into it, and it was blood. Now, how could fresh blood be in this locked, abandoned house? I turned and left very quickly and debated whether I was going to tell Ms. Collins the story that I am telling you today. I did. She said it was Catherine's blood. I had to know more. We went out for lunch, and she told me the story that her mother had told her, that she had promised never to tell anyone, but since her mother had passed, it seemed okay now. She said her mother believed that John had murdered Catherine in that house. Because ever since Catherine's disappearance, sometimes she would feel a cool breeze when no window was open, or a hand touched her shoulder. But the worst was the blood. So much blood. See, every year on the anniversary of Catherine's disappearance, the blood would come. Some of it, times a little bit, sometimes so much it would seep through to the floor below. And every year, Mrs. Collins would clean that blood up. Now immediately you have to wonder why a housekeeper would stay in this situation. But it was the Depression. She needed to make money for her family, and she was so afraid of John that he might come after her or might do something to her that she stayed, and she stayed quiet until John himself vanished. And about that, she said Catherine got him. Her blood overcame him. Not sure what that means. Not sure if I even believe this story that I tell you. But I have a lot of ghost stories that I could tell. But I chose this night of all nights to tell this story because this is the anniversary of Catherine's disappearance. And I feel like since I am really the last person to know this, that I should share it with others. So we are going to try and remember Catherine in this. I have a few things to show you. I have a book from Catherine's collection called The Torchbearers of Spiritualism. Spiritualism, of course, is the belief that your soul, your consciousness lives on after death. Spirit mediums are those who supposedly can talk to the dead. These are biographies of those spirit mediums, and I think she must have been interested in the spirit world in some way. This is actually from my Uncle Joe's collection. You guys have seen some of these ghost shows on television? Yes? And you know they have all sorts of these electronic things that are supposed to find the ghost or tell you if a ghost is there or something like that. Well, the Victorians didn't have that. They had things like this. This is called a spirit bell. See, the crystal has been formed in such a way to resonate with the energy in a room. Of course, when the energy is stable, like this here, it doesn't. When an entity enters that room, it will or should ring. I always bring it along in instances like this. Now, I also have another part of my family's collection that is interesting, and it was the way that spirit mediums would contact the dead. And they would use these children's school slates. They would clean them off. This is what children used in the classroom instead of paper at the time. They would clean them off, and they would put them together, and hopefully they would get a message from the spirit. So we're going to try and do the same with this. And the last thing I have is a glass of Catherine's and a handkerchief of hers. A couple things we're going to do here to help remember her and to make sure this works is that we have some rules as they did here. I'll get the picture here. I'm going to ask everyone to put their feet flat on the floor. Look to your left and your right. If you do not know the person sitting next to you, introduce yourself because you're going to be holding their hand in a moment.
Hi, you're Shirley.
I'm William.
Oh, hi, William.
I'm going to be coming over here too.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to join hands. I'm going to join the audience also here in a moment. We do this for a couple reasons. One, if anything does happen, and we do make some contact, which is rare, if anything, we want to be able to control everything. We want to make sure that we're going to be okay in this. And it's easier to do this rather than as a group of individuals, as a one-mind group. The other thing is that if something does happen, sometimes people get a little afraid and they will run. And it's dark and we don't want anybody getting hurt, right? So hang on to the people around you. I'm going to sit here. Hold your hand. Okay, just concentrate on Catherine. Keep an eye on her. Just focus on her. Take a deep breath. Relax. Take another breath. Relax. Catherine, we are here for you. We are here to remember you. We are your friends. Come to us, Catherine. Give us a sign, please. Come for us. Take a deep breath. Let it out. Relax. Focus on Catherine. Catherine, we're not here to hurt you. We're here to remember you. Please come to us, Catherine. Oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. Everybody, I don't know what's going on. Something. I don't know what's going on here, folks. Just keep your hands together. Catherine, is this you? Are you here with us, Catherine? Catherine, please. Catherine, can you give us a message? How about, can you give us the lights? Please, Catherine. Give us the... Just keep your hands together here, please. The blood is the sign. And now you have a ghost story you can tell your friends firsthand. I want to finish tonight by telling you about a dream I've been having. I dreamt that I was walking through a graveyard, and the tombstones were so old and worn that I could not read the inscriptions on them. And I woke feeling unnerved by this strange dream. The very next night, the same dream, the same tombstones. And when I woke, I realized I had dreamt this dream before, and I was dreaming it again. Very strange. But on the third night, something was different. On one of those tombstones was my name. So frightened by it, I broke it off and scraped it against the others until it could no longer be seen. And I awoke feeling triumphant that I had finally conquered that strange and terrible dream. But it was not the case. The very next night, my name was back. That was 3 nights ago. And I haven't slept since. See, folklore tells us that if I dream this dream again, there may be another inscription with 2 dates, the date of my birth and the date of my death, this year. Folklore tells us that this will be my last dream, a dream from which I will never awake. But folklore also tells us that the telling of a repetitive dream transfers the dream from the teller to the listeners. And if that's the case, I'd like to wish you all pleasant nightmares. Thank you very much. Thank you.